Dead men tell no tales, but their ships speak volumes. Welcome to the Cursed Compass, where we explore the darkest maritime mysteries.
If you walk along the beaches of Boulogne-sur-Mer during a late summer storm, locals will tell you to listen closely to the wind. According to regional folklore, the howling of the gale sometimes carries a very human sound, the phantom wailing of women and children, crying out from the dark water. That legend is rooted in a gruesome reality. On the morning of September 1st, 1833, the tide washed exactly 82 bodies onto the French sand. Among the wreckage, locals found a woman holding her child. Her arms were locked in an embrace so tight that they couldn't be pried apart. The debris belonged to the Amphitrite, a British transport ship. She had sailed from Woolwich carrying a crew, 12 children, and 108 female convicts destined for the penal colony in New South Wales. The ship had run aground on a sandbank a mere 3/4 of a mile from the shoreline. As the disaster unfolded, thousands of French citizens gathered on the beach, close enough to clearly see the stranded vessel. 133 people died in plain sight of a willing rescue party because of a fatal collision between maritime disaster and bureaucratic protocol. In 1833, the Victorian justice system showed very little leniency to the poor. Most of the women sentenced to transportation on the Amphitrite were convicted of petty theft or prostitution, crimes often driven by extreme poverty and desperation. Some women even saw the terrifying voyage across the world as their only way out. Take Maria Hoskins, an impoverished 28-year-old. She intentionally stole a watch from her landlady and told the arresting officer that if she wasn't transported to Australia, she would commit murder just to guarantee she was sent away for a fresh start. But the state treated these prisoners entirely as cargo. Below deck, 120 women and children crammed into a space with 5.5-foot ceilings. 4 shared a single sleeping berth, leaving 18 inches of space each. Surgeon James Forrester maintained order. Disgraced previously, he demanded strict discipline, installing a wooden punishment box upright on the sun-baked top deck. The box was so narrow a prisoner couldn't sit down or bend their knees. The ceiling was so low that taller women had to press their chins into their chests just to fit inside. If the stifling heat made a prisoner scream for help, a crew member would simply dump a bucket of water over the top. By the time the ship cleared the harbor, it functioned as a floating, deeply stratified prison, where strict carceral hierarchy took precedence over survival. On August 30th, the Amphitrite hit a fierce summer gale. Struggling in the treacherous waves, the ship was blown toward the French coast and grounded heavily on a sandbank during low tide. A French pilot boat immediately set out from the harbor to rescue them, but Captain John Hunter turned them away. He knew the women were legally the property of the Crown and feared if brought ashore in France, they might escape. Knowing the ship wouldn't survive the incoming tide, a French sailor named Pierre Hennin tied a light rope around his waist. He jumped into the freezing, violent surf and swam for an hour to reach the Amphitrite, offering a lifeline to pull them to the beach. Captain Hunter refused to throw a line down to him. Hunter was convinced the ship would simply float free when the tide returned, so he left Hennin treading water in the heavy waves until the exhausted sailor had no choice but to swim back. As the storm worsened and panic set in, the ship's bosun finally ordered the longboat lowered, but Surgeon Forrester's wife, who was traveling as a passenger, refused to share a small boat with the convict women. Because of her objection, the evacuation was abandoned. When the high tide finally rushed in, the pounding waves snapped the Amphitrite in two. The women, who had been locked below, broke out of the hold. Their cries of absolute terror carried clearly across the wind to the thousands of French locals watching helplessly from the shore. The storm put the ship on the sandbank, but social status locked the doors. The captain and the surgeon chose the certainty of drowning over the possibility of their prisoners surviving as free women. By 2 a.m, the screaming stopped. Only 3 crewmen clung to wreckage and washed ashore alive. Every single female convict, every child, Surgeon Forrester, his wife, and Captain Hunter were dead. When the 3 survivors detailed the captain's refusals to the public, the tragedy became a massive scandal in England. The sheer loss of life exposed exactly how little value the state placed on the women they had condemned. The wreck of the Amphitrite haunted the public consciousness for decades, inspiring literature by Guy de Maupassant and dramatic, terrifying paintings by J.M.W. Turner. So when the wind howls off the coast of Boulogne-sur-Mer, you aren't hearing the supernatural. The phantom wails are a historical echo, the sound of 133 people who died because their society's rigid hierarchy demanded it.